We're rolling now?
We're rolling.
Awesome. All right, well, welcome everyone to our first official budget workshop. Tonight, we have a special treat for you all, which is our budget binder. And for that special occasion, what we're going to do is turn the meeting over to our fabulous business manager, who's going to walk us through the budget binder to explain what the sections are and what they do.
But first, I'd like to give it to Howard to give a little short little spiel about what we're dealing with this year.
Okay, great. Well, let me just say, if you don't mind, well, first of all, good evening all. Good to see everybody. I first of all want to be sure to take the time to thank Catherine for all the work that's gone into these budgets. It's been a lot of work, months of work, and for reasons I'll get into later, there's been a lot of changes that have been made several times, not even once, that have just taken, this has been an unusual journey, and we're not through yet. But I just want to thank you very much, Catherine, for all the good work and your, also you just, your positive attitude through it all, so thank you. I guess the next thing I want to point out is what's behind us here, this list. This outline is what we, as an administration, came up with when we started thinking about, okay, we've been asked to, in a sense, create a story of where we are and where we're headed. And this is kind of, in an outline form, the priorities that the administration felt we needed to come back to and check against in the process of putting together a budget for you all. And I'd be happy tonight, with the help of other administrators at the table, to explain more about what each of these means. Some of them are straightforward, some of them are not as straightforward. So when it's appropriate, and I understand that we have several meetings throughout the process to go over the budget, but I hope that we cover all of these and you understand them as you go about ultimately approving a budget for consideration. Also tonight, at some point, I don't know when, maybe a little bit later, Noel and others have offered to kind of give you a presentation of some options for our teachers and our students with respect to computers and technology. And that's part of the budget. We'll talk to you about what's in the budget. But people were kind enough to put together for you to really see some of this. And so tonight, maybe when we get to that part of the budget and talk about technology, maybe we could stop then and have you actually see some of the things that we have and how it's used for a couple of minutes. Are we here for about an hour and a half?
Yes.
Okay, I want to be mindful of that. So, well, let's see. I guess the thing that I want to say is that we were excited about this idea of kind of coming up with a story and connecting that with our budget priorities. I must say that two things happened along the way that caused us to have to go back and do some subtraction, some serious subtraction. The first time, when we started putting out what we thought were valuable, justified ideas for consideration, and not to say that everything made that list, because they didn't, but the things that made the first cut, I realized that from talking with board members informally and hearing from some members of town council that budget was beyond what people would feel to be acceptable. And I was asked to, spare the board having to do all this. Do what you can and present us with something that's been pared down. Okay, so that was the first iteration of a reduction. I will say that a number of the things that were in the original proposal, interestingly, are things that in the past we've had in Cape Elizabeth schools. For example, in the past we've had more custodians, I understand. We've had more secretaries, I understand. We've had, I believe, more educational technicians at the elementary school than we have. And there's a lot of things, and there could be, I'm sure, great reasons why those things have been reduced. But, so there was that list of things that we felt really you ought to be aware of and think about. Also, another example of that was an assistant for the nurses. There used to be a full-time person supporting the nurses. That is gone. And so then there are the things that we don't have, like, for example, we currently have a part-time gifted and talented teacher. It's very hard to find a full-time gifted and talented teacher. It's a lot harder to find one who's working for you 25% time. I mean, it's just, anybody who holds a credential, who wants full-time work, will find full-time work. So there were things like that that we felt we don't have, but that made sense and that you ought to be able to look at. So there was some of each. We also, I don't know if it spells it out so well, but I guess it's that first bullet, the one about student intervention and support. What I heard a lot from building level administrators and central office administrators is that we have a growing number of students with lovely children that have some complex needs that are much more demanding of resources and time and expertise than we've had some number of years in the past. And it's complicated, exhausting work, it's important work, it's gratifying work, but it's more, we want to be sure you realize that teachers and counselors and nurses and administrators are dealing with more of this each year. And we had offered in our first cut of a budget some additional support there. So when the cuts were made to bring it down by quite a bit, a lot of that was taken out of the budget, as discouraging as that was. Then, about 10 days ago, we received word from the Department of Education that what's called Essential Programs and Services, EPS, that we would be losing on the first presentation from the state, the governor's budget, $800,000 of that's revenue coming in. So that's a tremendous loss. This is on the heels of last year losing around $780,000. So in 2 years, Cape Elizabeth has if these numbers don't change, if they stay at 800,000, Cape Elizabeth will have lost about over $1.5 million of revenue on an annual basis going forward. That's very serious. And I was asked by the leadership of the board to try and, for tonight, absorb that loss. And so last week, I sat down with Catherine and made a lot of decisions that aren't necessarily my best thinking, but they were the best I could come up with at the time without the advantage of having all the experience and the intelligence of the administrative team to kind of weigh this out together. I just made some decisions to get the numbers down. What happened was we lowered the budget by taking out a good deal of additional programs that we thought were valuable. We brought it down to about a budget to budget, an increase of 1.6% from this year to a proposal that you're going to see here for next year. And then increased taxes, the revenues that are mostly generated from local taxes are going up 3.6%. And that's kind of in the ballpark of the average increase over the last 5 years, is around 3.5%. So this is at 3.6. But to get to 3.6 on that side, the side of revenues, we did something that was, you're going to probably say that sounds draconian, which was that we took out of your fund balance for funds that you have squirreled away over the years. We took $800,000 out of that, left in it around $600,000, and applied that $800,000 toward revenues. Without doing that, what's now 3.6 would be somewhere in the 7% range. And I think that you would say we can't do that. So at some point, we have to either make further reductions to the total budget to bring that down, or, and if you're uncomfortable with dipping into your special account to that degree, then we have to do something else, make other changes. Mostly it's going to be reducing the budget. And it's not dollar for dollar. I mean, it's a complicated formula. So this has been sobering. This has been anything but uplifting. It's been, I think to your administration as a whole, I don't want to speak for them, but I think it's been disheartening because they felt like they were challenged by you all with like, let's write the story. Let's be positive, creative. Let's not be crazy, but let's just really think about what are the needs for the schools and the children in Cape Elizabeth. And there's very little of that even standing today. In fact, in order to get to where the budget is where it is, some positions that were in the budget that we have people have left through attrition have just gone left. They're just empty. They've not been filled. And I know I've heard from Jeff about a social worker that he desperately feels he has to have that. I've heard from Mike, he really feels he's got to have an additional classroom teacher. And I've heard from Kelly that she really needs some support personnel, ed techs, paraprofessionals, whatever you want to call them. I mean, there's some strong feelings out here that you're going to be hearing about through the process. So it isn't as if what you're going to see here is what we can, quote, live with. I'm hearing that, no, if we're going to have to keep the budget within these limits, somewhere else we need to make the decisions of where we're going to cut. But there's some things that I decided to take out that others, for good reason, say, Howard, that's not the best, that's not good. It's not good for the children, not good for the teachers, so we need to talk about that. I don't know. I mean, I guess that's the kickoff.
Should we play the fanfare now?
Sure.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
yeah, you're welcome. So I guess that you want to basically march through this book.
Yeah.
At some point, when you see the word technology, please stop and Noel can invite people to go look at the computer.
Can I ask one clarifier, Howard, to the points behind you?
Yes.
Are they in any particular triage order?
No.
Would it be possible for us to get a hard copy of that to have in our budget binders? So as we're referring back to it,
Right.
it might be nice
Absolutely.
to have.
Yeah. Catherine, do you mind doing that?
Not at all.
Yeah.
As long as you send it to me.
One of the Kathys
Major
do it.
teaching and learning. Okay. What I was going to do was walk you through the budget binder. And the first one, I put another copy of our schedule just so everybody's on the same page. And the next one is a short letter from Howard talking about the budget. And you'll have time to peruse this on your own time. The next section is, instead of the separate narratives that we used to do in the past for each department, what we did here is all the department heads or administrators work together to create this one narrative based on our major teaching and learning considerations. So this was done before the subsidy written numbers came in, and I felt it didn't hurt for you to see what the narrative was before those numbers, because as Howard told you, the administrators didn't really get a chance to sit down with us and make the additional cuts. So that's what this next section is, and it's 7 pages long. I always do everything double-sided if I can help it. I'd hate cutting trees. On the first tab actually is called handouts. And the very first handout you'll see is the budget categories, based on this year's budget. This is a breakdown that we have to have per law, so I always try to make sure that's front and center. And then behind it is a 28-page document, which is the entire budget. And it's double-sided, and there are notes in there, to help explain some of the changes and stuff, but, please, don't hesitate to get your questions together, and we'll be happy to answer them. So as I said, that's 28 pages, double-sided. And this isn't stapled, so it's easier to flip through. I know that, and sometimes when you have staples up in the corner, it makes it harder to look at. So that's not stapled. And that reminds me, I have to give a huge thank you to my staff, Kathy Maxwell and Angel Forrest, because they were the ones who put these binders together for me. I created the items with the help of all the administrators, and then they took it all and put it all together for me. And they were the ones who also took it apart when I said, oh, we gotta change these figures. So they did a great job. It's like Santa's helper. I'd print something for them, I'd turn around, and it was all done. I was like, oh, this is great. Okay, so I had to give them kudos. So the next item that you see is a very colorful pie chart. That is based on the categories on the first page. And as you can see, the majority of what we do is regular instruction, which is to teach the majority of our kids. The page after that is the budget highlights. This is what I heard from the board was last year you really appreciated the pulling out what the highs and lows were and why. And so that's what this is. It's one document for the entire district. It's 9 pages. And you're gonna go, how come this wasn't listed in there? And how come that? What my criteria was, it had to be a monetary change of more than $2,500, and it had to be a percentage increase of at least 9% or higher. So you'll see, like, teacher salaries, it's gonna be hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it was only like 6%. So that's a relatively normal increase. So that you will not see here. So that's what this is. And as I said, that's 9 pages long. So we'll flip through. And then you'll come to the FY15 per pupil expenditure. That was, Yarmouth did something similar, and it was brought to my attention, and I went, oh, that seemed like a good idea. So we put that in there for you to see how we compare. This is based on FY15 figures. I took it off the DOE website, so it's always still a couple years behind, but at least gives you some idea of where we stand compared to the other districts that we tend to compare ourselves to. The page after that is initial proposals not included in this budget.
Bless you.
As Howard talked about, there was the nurse's assistant, the 5 RTI ed techs. I mean, there's a whole list here, but I do want to point out that the bottom item, which is the additional CIP, which is capital improvement plan, we originally, at the very beginning of this process, had over $900,000 in the budget that was based on that CIP 10-year plan. So we had anticipated needing $900,000, but as it's morphed through, it's down to $500,000 currently. But that number should really be $439,600, not the $319,300, because I took the 319 was one of the reiterations of the budget. So initially it was over 900,000. So we
and
did.
can I just
cut-
read, was it 439,600?
Yes, 439,600. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. And then on the next page is a listing of our fund balance. And I gave you all the history that I had on my spreadsheet. So you can see how you can go back quite a bit, and for years and years and years, our fund balance was between $200,000 to $400,000, and we were carrying, as of the end of the audit report this June, we had a fund balance of 1.4 million. So that's why, and I admit, I suggested to Howard to use 800,000 to help offset taxes because our fund balance is so high. Other people don't really agree with that concept, and we can change that figure if we need to, but that's where I was coming from in suggesting to use that amount.
may I join in for a second on that point? You understand that if you were to agree to this, you can't do this but once. I mean, there was a year from
Right.
now, this is gonna catch up with you.
Exactly, it will.
Right.
So this is just a one-time thing. So that makes it scary to do it that
Well-
way.
Can you just follow up with the suggested amount that auditors, and like a percentage?
The auditors require that the town keeps, I think it's 3% of their
Usually ran around 2, I thought.
budget amount, and I'm not totally up on that, I'll have to get back to you on that. I know the state, it requires that we keep around 3%. The state, it requires that we keep 3%. I'm not quite sure, I'd have to check with the auditors on that one. But the thing is, we are a municipal school department, so there are other people that view, well, we're a department of the town, so if anything happens to us, the town will help support us if anything happens. That's just one view. I'm not saying it's good or bad, it's just how some people view it. So, and I will get back to you on how much the auditors recommend. And the auditors are more looking at what the town needs to keep. And the town has a policy on how much they
Okay.
keep for a fund balance, and I think
guess
their
felt
policy
like
is
we
like
had a
8%.
recommendation for school budget particularly, and maybe there's something around
So
that.
my recollection is that we did ask them for a guideline, and it is a guideline of 2 to 3%.
That was my recollection.
But Kathy's recollection also of the town being the fiscal agent for the school is one who's legally responsible to keep a balance.
Mhm.
So I will
So it was
double
more
check
of a
on that.
recommendation.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah, it's not set in stone. So, but I will check
More
it with the
guidelines
auditors.
than rules, as they
Mhm.
say.
And one other question,
Mhm.
Kathy, Catherine.
I'm Kathy too, it's just
No,
confusing.
I
It
tried-
doesn't
I tried to
matter.
I was
straight.
looking right at her when I said Kathy. I didn't confuse.
And I didn't know that the state required a 3% fund balance. That's news to me.
For the town.
Well, no, that's actually school districts. However, they have never, ever, ever called you on it. I mean, they don't ever punish a school department who has less than that or who has more than that. It's just a kind of a guideline.
Okay. My understanding with the auditors in previous years, they've always sort of lauded us for, maintaining that 2 to 3% fund balance, and unlike a lot of other towns. So anyway, that
No.
was news to me, so, okay.
Okay, and I may have misspoken, and I will definitely clarify that and get you more information on that one. But I wanted to show you that's what our thinking was at this time. And the next page, the last page in this section, is the 5-year school budget and tax history. So the upper part is the expenditures. It's the budget. It's what we are going to go through on March 7th. And in 2016, 2017, you can see that there were all the transfers from the town to cover different areas. I mean, our full budget for 16-17 was a 3.2% increase, but after you deducted those transfers from it, that was 1.97%.
That's where I got that number from.
What, the 1.97?
So, I knew that it was less than whatever.
Yeah, so what happened last year is the town manager came to me and said, and he goes, instead of netting all of the town monies that pays, that helps offset the budget, he wanted me to pull it out of the budget. So that's why you have it separated out there. And in this year's budget, it's down below in considered revenue, which, and I talked to the auditors about it just to make sure I understood it, and they said you could do it either way. It's more transparent if you do the way we are currently doing it, so people can see how much the town is paying towards our facilities and technology and HR. But I do want to point out that the town does pay for that, but Public Works from the town also does our mowing and our plowing, and we don't pay additional for that. I mean, but the HR doesn't cover the full business office that does the payroll for the town and does the town and school and does the payables for the town and school. So it's not a one-to-one calculation. It's more like, here's some idea. We realize that some of the expenses you are incurring are town side, but some of the expenses the town is incurring is school side. So We are a one-town concept. So I did want to point that out there. The last column is our proposed budget for this year. And you can see the very first item under revenue is our state subsidy. And you can see how it has gone down over the last 2 years. We have included the transfers from the town. We are using, as Howard pointed out, 800,000 under, and I have to correct this, the auditors say it's the unassigned fund balance, not undesignated. That's my fault. I don't use any money from Medicaid to help offset the budget because it's very tenuous and we don't really get all that much. Yeah. And state agency client is very minimal. As you can see, we're only anticipating 7,000. High school activity fees I did increase based on what we spent last year in 15-16. So the numbers that I have for the fees that I've budgeted for are based on what we actually received in 15-16. I want to try to, and hopefully we'll get more than that, but I don't feel comfortable putting that in the budget. So the portion of local property taxes has gone up 4%. The amount of the portion of the budget that has to come from local property taxes has come up 4%. But that's not the same as the tax rate, because when you do the tax rate, you have to bring into consideration the valuation of the town. So that's why I've done this whole thing for you, so you can see, and on the very bottom, it says we're using the medium home at the cost of $314,000. So what the tax rate that I'm showing you is the increase based on a house valued at $314,000. So it's at least something to work with.
Before you move on, if I could just say one thing about revenues. There are 3 other areas that are we're unclear about right now in terms of funds coming in from the state. One of them is special ed. That's still unclear what how that will work out in terms of a reimbursement for our expenses. There's also discussion by the governor in his proposed budget for something about charging school districts directly for what they call system administration. And so that would be pulled out of an expense and would be fully funded by the local. That's, we're not sure how that's going to work out, but that's unclear to us. And then we've also heard that there's proposal for transferring all the cost of contributing toward teachers' retirement to the local as opposed to being split. It's now split between local and state. It used to be completely state. So if that moves over, that could be another expense that we have not anticipated.
How did you placehold health insurance?
In this budget, we did a 6% increase.
We started with 8, and we dropped it to 6.
Trying to be
Just trying to make up something here.
Yeah.
Each percent is around $25,000. So we, if we're right about that, then great. If not, then each percent above 6 is another 25,000. And I should point out that, as has been said by others, this $800,000 that we're showing as a loss, that number could go up or could go down. And we may not know the answer to that until sometime in June.
Okay, next tab, which is enrollment and staffing. The first item you'll see is a graph, chart, whatever you want to call it. The green line is our enrollment with 1 decimal point moved, because our enrollment is around 1,600 and our staffing is in the hundreds. So in order to get them on one chart, I moved the decimal point for our enrollment. So, but it gives you an idea of what we're working with. Our enrollment peaked back in 05-06, and now it is steadily going down, quite steadily. And you can see the blue line is our total professional staff. That means everybody in the teacher bargaining agreement. So all teachers, all special ed teachers, social workers, OT, anything like that, guidance, those are all in there. And you can see how our staffing increased and has been pretty steady and trickling up a little bit over time. So I just wanted you guys to see how that compares. I mean, things have changed a lot. We do have kids that are more diversified, but it seem to have higher needs, and we have all the regulations from the state and the feds. But this is just shows you what the numbers are. Gives you a picture. The next page is
Catherine, are there,
sure.
Is there a accompanying chart that has the actual numbers?
Yes, I can give that to you if you want. So I'll put that out there.
Thank you.
And the next page is a staff ratio for the Pond Cove and the middle school, to give you some idea of where we are currently and where we are expecting to be. Numbers, if I remember. So the figuring out staffing for Pond Cove and the middle school, it's easier for me to give you a chart like this, because you know you have you're anticipating so many kids, and you divide them out between so many classrooms, and we have a policy that gives a range on how many students we want per classroom. So what we're anticipating is currently no change between what we have for staffing this year and next year, but I do want to point out that the next year's fifth grade is the max number of students we have for that age group is 24 students in a classroom. So we're at 23.8 with the 5 teachers, and that's really close. So if we have any kids come in, I think it's like 3 or 4 will put you, 4 I think will put you over that 24 limit. So it's close. So I want you to be aware that there is that issue to worry about. So the next page is, this page shows you how many kids have come in and how many kids have left in a year for grades 5th, 6th, and for middle school, let's put it that way. So it was an interesting to look at that, and it's about not quite 10 years, but you can see all the ins and outs, and the bottom line is that overall we have increased more than we've decreased in the middle school. The Pond Cove and the high school don't have these figures. These aren't figures that can readily pull from Power School or anything. It just so happens that the middle school had been manually keeping tabs on this for several years now, so that's why we have it for the middle school. It would be nice to have for the other schools, but that's something that we'll work on going forward. Yes.
Would you just mind telling me how to read it? Like,
Sorry.
confused about.
Well,
let's take any year. Just.
I'll start at the top. On the 2008-2009 year,
Uh-huh.
the top 2 lines, that's the kids coming in. The lines, the ones with the parentheses, that's the kids going out. So the parentheses mean minus, and no parentheses mean positive.
Okay.
And if you need me to do it in a different format, I mean, Mike did it,
No.
had it different, so.
That's fine. I just
Okay.
needed to
Okay.
know what it meant.
That was me doing my Excel subtotaling thing, trying to make it easier for me, so I know my brain doesn't always work like everybody else's. So the next page is the high school class size student load analysis. And the high school's a little trickier to do this because they have many more offerings, and not every kid has to take every offering. The only offerings, it's English and math that they have to take all 4 years, or English is the only one they have to take all 4 years. So it makes it a little trickier, but Jeff's able to give you some idea of what the class load is, and to give you some idea of what classes are higher in attendance and which are lower in attendance and stuff. So we thought that was useful information. And the last item in this section is your class size policy. I thought it would be helpful to have that at your fingertips so you didn't have to go look it up. So then if we have a question about how many kids in a grade you approved, then you have it right there. So that's that. The next tab is new program and position evaluations. This is something new that we're doing this year. And this section is for positions that were new in the budget last year and these are to show you how those new positions went, or new programs also. So I won't go through all of them, but that's the concept behind these sheets, is to evaluate the new programs or positions that were in the budget the previous year. And then the next tab is new program position proposals. So this tab is what was proposed for the budget, 17-18 budget. And the very first item is the 5 general ed tech 3s for RTI. I left them in there just because I forgot. It doesn't hurt to let them know what the proposal was. So, and that's in there. And and it also in here is other items that are currently in the budget at this point. So these are new proposals, positions for this year. Some are positions, some are programs.
So question,
Yes.
is the only proposal that's in here now that didn't make it to the final cut of the budget is the 5 gen ed?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll take a quick look, but I believe that is the case.
And another question with that, Catherine, does
There.
that mean, is there's 0 added, like,
Correct.
not 5, it's not a matter of 5?
There are
2,
none at this point. And it's a good question, though. Like, the next item is responsive classroom. That is still in there fully as it was initially proposed. The item after that is a gifted and talented teacher. That we initially proposed it 1 FTE, 1 full-time equivalent. It is now it's now half. It's now 0.5. So that has changed. The office manager has not changed, correct? Or
It's all local entitlement, and it hasn't changed, no.
Okay.
Just the funding of it is being different, to do differently.
okay. And the support
Can I ask a
services.
question?
Sure.
Going back to the gifted and talented
Yeah.
teacher, did I just hear you say that the proposal is moving from a 1.25 to
The proposal's moving from a one full-time teacher to a 0.5.
it was
It's originally
0.25,
0.25
It
now,
was-
the proposal was for 1,
and,
back down
but it's back down to,
0.5.
To half,
Got
to
it.
0.5.
Thank
So
you.
it's still a
Right,
slight
From the current
increase.
year, we were going up 75% of a position to go from quarter to full-time. And it was cut to half-time just to get the budget to work. I mean, it's
Yep.
just not as if it dawned on us, oh, this is perfect, half-time is all we need.
I understand.
Right.
I just want to make sure I have the right information, thank you.
Yep. And the other positions, the office manager is still in there. We're looking at maybe finding a different way to fund it. Currently, it's 50% local entitlement, 50% regular instruction. The support services coordinator is still in there as originally proposed. And then the behavior specialist,
That's a reallocation, so.
yes, that one's no additional money, that's a reallocation. And the behavior specialist, we have been funding 50, 60, and there are only 2 days? We-
It's 2.5 a week.
Two, okay, so the behavior specialist position, we have currently in local entitlement only 2.5 days a week. And that's a contracted service. What we'd like to do is bring in a full-time employee position, but because of the cost, we have reduced this to only 4 days a week. We had it 5 days a week, and now we've reduced it to 4 days a week. So that's it for the new proposals and positions. And
But-
you'll,
But may I say, this is not a complete list.
no,
I mean, there are
no.
like, the custodians are not in here.
No, that's my fault.
The support for the nurses is not in here, so you just understand, this is just some of them, but not all of them.
Right, and,
Right.
and I gotta say, Greg did do, one of these for his custodial positions and stuff, and I forgot to put it in, so, sorry about that. I'll make sure we get that in there. The next tabs you'll see are empty, but the concept is when we do the big go through the budget line, hopefully not line by line, but in more depth, that as we come to a section, whoever, like when we start with Pond Cove, if Kelly has other additional information she feels that would be helpful to you, she'll hand it out at that time, and then you have a place to put it in your binder. So that's what these are there for. Under the high school, we do have, there is a copy of the memo from, this is actually from PATHS, the Portland Area Technical High School, I think,
Yes.
is what it's called. Because that line went up quite a bit. So I thought it would be helpful to you to have the reasoning of why it went up. So that's why there is that item under high school. And then there's nothing again until we get to athletics. And these are the participation sheets. The top one is like a summary, and then you have it broken down between seasons. The other three. And then the next item that has something in it is technology. So this may be a good time to talk about the
Oh, good.
Chromebooks and,
You ready to go?
I'm always ready to go.
Great, so let me just try and frame this, so, I'm not gonna do a very good job of it, but I'll get it started. So, we have to make some serious decisions about technology and what makes the most sense for our teachers and our students. I think we want to get funding for, I think, 7th and 8th graders. Is
That's
that
correct.
From the state.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain all this? And then, so we're wrestling with, well, what's the best thing to go forward with, and you'll be seeing about all in here. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Well, this year we started tackling, or we're almost at the completion of the technology plan. And so the first part about doing any of this is to coming up with a work scope of what we're going to do for the next 3 years. And then put a schedule behind it, which we have some milestones that are pretty attainable, and then we also stretched ourselves a little bit with it. So the final part was the budget. And right before Christmas, the budget was, pieces were in place and so on and so forth, and then they decided, the Maine DOE decided that they were no longer going to fund Milty at the high school level or anywhere else. So they made some decisions. So that kind of pushed everything out, and I had to go out to other vendors to see and get proposals and quotes for what they offered and stuff like that.
No, sorry to interrupt. Can you just explain to make sure everybody understands what the cancellation of Milty implies?
Cancellation of Milty. Milty First was introduced because Governor King wanted to ensure that all 7th and 8th grades had some technology equipment that they could use. And it slowly expanded so that other grade levels could participate in it. And what they do is they have two major vendors, HP and Apple. And so they combine all the schools together, and they come up with some equipment that is suggested to use, and we make a decision as a school district of which device we want to use, and then we pay for it over 4 years. So right now, we currently have, we're under contract for 7th and 8th grade for Milty laptops, Apple laptops, for 4 years. We're on our first year. We're also under contract at the high school for, there's 2 cohorts. One will expire next year, and it's iPads. And then the following contract, the other 2 grades will expire the next year after that. And those are also iPads. We also are under contract with Milty, with Pond Cove. All the Pond Cove staff have laptops through the Milty program. And that expires in 2 years. We're on our 2nd year. So we use that vehicle to help us with the cost of technology and make it spread the payments out a little bit over time. So and on top of that, they also fund the internet. Not so much the network Maine, which does the bandwidth, but they fund the devices for. I'm trying to not use as much jargon. The wireless communication, we call them APs, the wireless communications, and some of the networks to drive those APs and so on and so forth. They are pulling that also. They're not going to be in that business anyway. So, but they're going to hold the contract It's supposed to expire this year, but they're gonna hold the contract for one more year. I'm not quite sure what that cost is. Okay, so that's unknown. Been asking almost daily about what they thought that cost was. So next year anyway, we're gonna have to make a decision on what we're going to do with the wireless at the high school and the middle school. We're already all set at the Pond Cove. We control that wireless with our own devices. We kinda like controlling them. And the reason we like controlling them is because we can see more activity and we can move the wireless around if we find that there's interference. We asked the state to do it. We have to do, it takes 2 or 3 weeks for them to actually come down. They do a survey, and then it takes a couple weeks for them. And by that time, school's over with. So anyway, so that's the Milty program. So to step back a little bit, we've been working on the technology plan, and we had each level, Pond Cove, middle school, high school, and office had a team and got together and say, okay, what are we trying to do? Where are we now? Where are we going to go in the future? And so we came up with that, with a good work scope that, again, needs to be one more iteration. We have to bring it to the teachers to take one more look at it. But in the meantime, we went and we looked at different options. One option was, well, what happens if we don't do anything? Okay, because that's always an option. One of the things about that is that we found that the high school, both the staff and the students really would like to have some type of keyboard device. Okay, so that kind of limits the iPad right now as we talk. Okay, the iPad Airs that they all have, you can hook keyboards in them, but they're Bluetooth, and that gets a little bit tricky when you have a classroom full of kids. Or the other one is a wire plug-in, and that gets a little tricky too, because then there's 2 devices that they have to carry around. So that was one thing. The other thing we have to be concerned about is the state testing. Right now will be the last year we can use the iPad 2s, which we have at Pond Cove, and we have for 5th and 6th 101. And so that type of thing is, they've been used for 6 years now, and usually you look at iPads, they're about 3 years old, so we've done, and they've been in the hands of students. So I'm not saying that adults take better care of them, but sometimes something happens like that. So we have to think about those type of things. So we came up with that. The other thing we looked at is we had a pretty good lengthy conversation with Falmouth. They have bring your own device. And they didn't dive into the multi-program, so they had that advantage, okay, where we've had this advantage since day one that we give the devices and so on and so forth. And so we came up with some pros and cons. Obviously, the pro is, the cost is really the pro, but there's a lot of cons, and you're asking a teacher to have a lesson and do a lesson without the same device, it gets relatively hard. Then you also look at the fact that none of the businesses out there ask their employees to bring their own device. They all provide devices and stuff like that. So you question that type of thing.
But if I could, because
Sure.
I was part of that decision point, it was also, as kids looked to going off to college, they were gonna be in multi-device environments, that's all.
Right.
So it's just sort of a sense of, well, here's where you're going. And
Well,
it was
that's
a
an
huge-
advantage.
Exactly. It
Mhm.
was a huge price point difference for
Right.
Falmouth, and so we went that way. It wasn't perfect, but it's an option.
Yeah, it's an option, and that's a great point, because then you have a multiple of devices in here, and students can share, and collaboration becomes very,
Right.
very key,
Right.
okay, much more key to the thing, so that it is a plus to it. So we looked at that, and then we've looked at 3 devices, and I don't know if Ginger and Carolyn, you wanna just bring the devices up so that they can see it, I don't know?
Or do you want them to go?
Or do you want to,
over the-
you want
can
to
we go
stretch
to
a
the
little bit,
devices?
We
and
should
go
take a
take a
field
look
trip.
at
Let's
it?
go walk, you want to go look at them?
Okay, why don't we do that, and would you mind being the? Okay, good, thank you.
Three different devices that we had talked about. So the closer to the entrance of the library is a Chromebook that we
Chromebooks.
talked about. There are
Interesting.
kind of pros
And
and
then
cons
I've had
of each device. One is stable. So this one right here is a Chromebook, and these are open right now. We have a little handy dandy portable pros and cons spreadsheet if you'd like to take that with you. It's just gonna work with all of it. And feel free to look at the Chromebook. So these, we found
currently have. This one would come with a keyboard. As you can see, Noel talked a little bit about the problems with a wired keyboard and the Bluetooth keyboard. This one is the new version and it connects right in there. It's not wired, but there is that. And then this is the MacBook Air 11-inch version that the middle school has right now. So each of the devices has pros and cons, and this sheet right here kind of has a description of what each of them have as pluses and minuses.
Our thought was to give you an idea of what you get for your money, and really, the Chromebook is a Chrome browser with a keyboard. It is not as quick, or as we would say, slower, and it's limiting. These two devices we consider devices where you can do content creation, multimedia creation. If you want students to just consume from the internet and do research, that Chromebook is probably fine. But these are the devices that allow them to create things like a podcast or to use science probes to give you that hands-on computer-based learning experience. So it's a big difference between the Chromebook and these two devices in particular. Everything on the table is a plus. The thing with these, if we don't have laptops for our students, we would not want to say we're not going to do computer-based labs in science. We would not want to say our fine arts people, Roz and her group down there doing art, are not going to be used the Adobe Suite. So she has laptops down there. We have 2 big carts of laptops available to the students for their science labs. So if you go with this device, we feel like you need to have these devices here to be shared. The downside is, if I'm a student and I have just done my lab and I have my data, it is a program that it doesn't run on the iPad. It only runs on the laptop. So my data is stuck on this device. So I can't just walk away with my device and work on my lab. I've got to go to the library, or this data is this. We just ran this cart through here and did an acceleration. So this is position versus time. So the student wants to work with the data and do their write-up. So they can't do that. They've got to take this file with them, but they can't open it on an iPad.
If they want to use it on that computer, they have to hope that the teacher isn't teaching another section of the same class and using the laptops, or that another student hasn't taken that during his or her study hall so that it is still available.
It would be great if we could just upload it into Google Drive and they would have it, but it's not openable. These are pretty specific software applications. Same thing with the Adobe Suite that we use for our fine arts.
If I heard Noel correctly earlier today, I think he's saying that when he surveyed teachers and students, the vast majority leaned toward this machine, correct?
No question, hands down. They see this as a device that does everything that they need to do. They see it as the device. The kids who bring their laptops to school are mostly upperclassmen, seniors, some juniors, but these are the kids, this is the laptop they're going to take to school with them when they leave here. So the student said to me today, after he came through, he said, oh, shoot, if we do get those, I just went out and bought a laptop because he felt like he needed that. It's easier for him to have that handy and have all his stuff on his laptop to work on, so rather than the iPad without the keyboard that he currently has through the school. Questions, comments?
The price difference, are we gonna?
So we have a little,
It's on the sheet.
if anyone would like, they haven't gotten one, there's,
And that includes warranty on it, and also includes a case on it and stuff like
Do you have
that.
any indication how many kids actually are using their iPads?
And is this the
Anecdotally.
iPad they're using, do they have
No, that's not the
keyboards? 'Cause that's
iPad.
my understanding, they don't.
they're using is exactly like this one. This is the type of student iPad that they have with the case that it comes with. We have keyboards that they can borrow from the library, but they don't have one that physically comes with the iPad.
Because anecdotally, I'm hearing that they're not even bothering using them now.
I'm teaching a class right now, and it's fascinating when I tell kids to take out a device. There's a few, and I'm teaching seniors, there's a few kids who take out a laptop, there's maybe 1 or 2 who take out their iPads, and everybody else is using their phones.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's what's happening.
So we're using Google Classroom, and Google Classroom is an awesome way to minimize paper and improve just paper flow and management. And you can do a quick quiz from Google Classroom on a phone if it's multiple choice. But if it's a short answer, or Carolyn certainly doesn't want to teach research in the library on a phone.
And as I'm starting to see US history policy paper researchers come in and kids are like, I can't really see my database on here, what am I supposed to do? And I'm just like, well, you can use your iPad. Oh, I left it at home because I don't use it. Well, you're using it right now, so do you not use it or do you just not want to use it? So I think that a lot of the things that kids are not maybe doing every single day, but they do pop up as major projects, it's difficult for them to do a major research project on a phone because the screen is very small. It's difficult for them to both have a tab open for note-taking or an app open for note-taking and the database or the article or the video that they're watching on the same tiny little screen that they're using. And I have found that when kids come in with their phone, they'll try to use it for 15 minutes and then I'll say, just use one of the computers. And they do that and they're like, oh, wait, this is so much easier than using a phone. So I think kids are more comfortable with their phone because it's a device they're familiar with, but when they actually are told, you have another option, you don't have to use this tiny phone, they realize, oh wait, that isn't the best device for this.
And I would say as we're setting up more and more classes with Google Classroom, we'll go into the classroom and help the teacher get it set up. And a lot of the students I'll find already have three or four classes that they have Google Classroom for. So that's a great tool that we will continue to use. One of Isoon Simpson with her students did a podcast project.
And the students used their iPads to do a podcast, and they were doing a podcast on the science of different things that you read about. And the one Ginger is going to talk about is one that a student did on the science of mummification. And the students hadn't ever, Isoon wanted them to use GarageBand before. They were like, oh, I want to use iMovie. We did that in middle school. We know how to use that. And she was like, no, I want you guys to learn how to use a new tool. So I came into their classroom for like 10 minutes and told them a very, very quick, this is a GarageBand, very quick tutorial, and then they were all really able to figure it out on their own and either use it on their school iPad or an Apple computer either in here or in the Achievement Center. If they really, really didn't want to use the iPad, we do have smaller labs, and this is what.
So this is an example of content creation. Just listen to a little bit.
Welcome to my podcast. Today we're going to delve into the chemistry of mummification. What is mummification, you ask? Oh well, it was often used during the times of the Egyptians, but this isn't a history lesson. Mummification is when the body is embalmed and preserved using many chemical compounds and natural substances. Let's look into the chemistry. The first steps were removing the organs but leaving the heart. The organs were then dried and put away. The main way to dry out the body was using salts, Na, sodium, and Cl, chloride, in the form of natron. Natron is a natural salt mixture containing mainly sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate, but also small amounts of sodium chloride and sodium sulfate. The mixture absorbs water easily and makes sure the body wouldn't rot. Sometimes it took up to 70 days for the body to dry completely. Fun fact, someone had to guard the bodies because the intense smell attracted desert scavengers. Once
Okay.
totally dry,
We'll leave it right there.
That was uplifting.
Just a couple of things. I mean, this could be the next podcast. She did a great job. She did a music soundtrack on there. She had the strumming to emphasize a couple of points. She had the fun fact. Really a nice job, doing the whole thing. So really good. And she even put a little thumbnail so when you open her file, you see the mummy on there. So that's an example. So I soon had 2 classes do that. Very, very cool. That's content creation. That may be the next NPR podcast that you hear. So.
And that was done on an iPad?
That was done on the iPad that the current students currently have, so it was done on this iPad Air that they, well, not this one, but it was done on her iPad Air.
So again, content creation in these 2 devices, not on the Chrome.
Okay,
That's
and
one of the
you may have said this already, I might have missed it. Why is it a little check mark for the iPad?
The research one is a little check mark, and I put that on there as the library and instructional technology specialist. The research abilities on the iPad, they are really great for looking at information and for taking notes, but sometimes they have a little bit of issue doing both at the same time. And a lot of that has to do with the multitask browsing of the current iPad device, is that sometimes iPad tabs will reload when they are not the active tab, and kids will say, oh no, I didn't save my device, because kids are kids and they forget to save every time they type something, and they might lose something, or the formatting might get messed up. So they can do it, but they have to be patient, and they have to learn at the very beginning, I must save my work as soon as I add it, which, when you're a high school student doing your first major research project, that can be a lot to take on.
We felt like it would be unfair to put an X, but it wasn't a big check. It was, okay, you can do it if everything goes right, but in terms of opening a bunch of tabs, the Chromebook and the laptop would be better for that, so there's a little bit of issue with that.
And when kids are doing their major world history 2, which is a sophomore research class, they use something called Noodle Tools, which is a note-taking and research formatting tool. And this year it's a lot better than it was last year, and it auto-saves more frequently, but it is one where it'll format their sources in MLA format if they grab all the right information, and it'll put all the periods and the italics in there, and it'll help you format your notes. But if you don't save your work, it will sometimes reload, even if you don't reload it. So it can be kind of a pain for students.
Is this something, that I have no idea, is this something that you see as an operation upgrade possible, or no? I mean, would you even know? Like, is this something the iPad, they might fix?
I think
just
definitely,
with an
this is
upgrade?
the newer iPad is already a lot better than the current iPad that we have. It has something called split screen where you can look at 2 tabs at once, so that makes it a lot easier. I mean, it is a smaller screen than the MacBook, so that you are looking at a small screen and a small screen next to each other. It is currently better than it was, and it is even now better than it was in September. So companies are responding to people who are asking to make changes to.
They understand that a lot of schools are using iPads, and we've noticed that a lot of the apps are getting better and better and closer to mimicking exactly what the computer does.
And I appreciate that both of you work in the high school. Do we have any perspective from the middle school as far as 7th and 8th graders are using the laptops, and
Just
5th and
kind of
6th graders have access, but not one-to-one? I don't know. I know you, sorry to put you on the spot.
Well, they have, the 7th and 8th graders have the MacBooks.
Right, wonderful.
5th and 6th graders have iPad, essentially one-to-one, but the devices aren't assigned to them and they can't go home. So there's a charging station and a cart in each 5th and 6th grade classroom where the iPads stay, or they can travel with the student during the day in between classes. But so every middle school student has access to a device all day, every day. 7th and 8th graders have Milty-insured devices that can go home with them.
Is the $1,100 price tag here for the 11-inch or the 13-inch?
So we.
There's a $10 difference between the 11th and the 13th.
Oh,
So it's minimum.
okay.
I'll throw in the $10 per device for the 13. We'll have a big sale.
So that's the price of the 13, because for $10, I'm not gonna.
Originally, when we put this together, we were talking 11, and when he came back with the $10, it's like, oh, wow, that's awesome.
Was, right. Okay, thanks.
So it'd be the full size like this
Yeah,
one.
full
So
size
11,
this one, and
13.
this is the one the middle school currently has, so that's why it's.
So that's 11, that's
Oh,
13.
okay.
Because
So
when we
we
put this
get-
together, that's what we thought we were doing, but.
When you did your surveying, was it around iPads with keyboards?
Well, see, one of the things on the survey, again, you have to take it with a couple of grains of salt. First of all, if I went home and my son came to me and said, Dad, I just got a job working as a dishwasher at the local restaurant, and I need to have a car, and I said, well, do you want a Ferrari or do you want a Ford Pinto? And of course, they probably pick a Ferrari. So we have to understand that part of it, okay? But the other thing is that, so when we looked at the comments, because not only did they have to take the survey, which is a quick, 1, 2, and 3 type of thing, but we also required them to do a comment in it. And a lot of the comments in there on the student survey part was, well, the iPad didn't have a keyboard. So obviously they didn't quite understand the question, okay, in the first place.
Or see the picture.
Or see the pictures, or come down and visit, the library and stuff like that. So you have to take that with a little bit of grain of salt.
So that's hard data to use then?
Well, it's hard data to use. Both, if you look at the number 1 choice, obviously was the MacBook. The number 2 choice was definitely the iPad, and the number 3 was the Chromebook. So both the students and the staff were both surveyed. The other thing that we also did on one of the surveys was if you could bring your own device, would you be able to do it? And I think it was 69% said no, they didn't have a device to bring in.
And we did
So as-
forget to ask grade level, which I
So we
regret.
included all the seniors that have theirs, so.
So, you know, that was part of the discussion on bring your own device and stuff like that to cover that.
So the question wasn't, could you, if needed, it was, is there one at home you could bring in?
That's correct.
That's the difference.
Okay.
And one of the,
Whoops.
promise anything, but at the end of March, Apple's coming out with the 4 new devices for the iPads. That's one of the things. The other thing is that I'm a member of a listserv with 135 other tech coordinators, directors, and we've been working with Apple to see if we can do a group buy as the state did. Again, I can't say that that's going to, that price that I got in there was just Cape Elizabeth going to Apple and saying, you know, what can you do for us? And so on and so forth. And that include, the price that's in there is for 600 devices, which is a 520 for the students and 1 for each staff member. Okay, so that, and there was a lot of things that we fumbled with, okay, honestly. One of the things is giving the staff a different device than what they gave the students. Okay, that was an error that we made, but that was the Milty program at the time. Another thing that I believe we've corrected, and we're really going on the upswing. Find 2 young ladies here have really done a Trojan effort this past year, working with the staff, working with the students to grade the iPads. So we're seeing that the use of the iPads is gaining momentum. We didn't, you know, one of the errors that we made is we just kind of gave the iPads and hoped things were going to be well, and without a lot of professional development. We've also, thanks to some negotiations next year, we have 14 of those dates out there to do more professional development, which I assume will, you know, I'll allow to get some of that time. I'm going to negotiate with my friends here, but I'm going to try and get some of that time to do that. So all those things, you know, the upswing is happening here at the high school. So I really don't want to say too much more. You only have about 15 more minutes. But,
Yep.
and next week, obviously, I'll say a lot more.
I just want to quickly thank you for putting this together, first of all, and thank you both for so much, but also thank you for looking at that alternative source to group buy. I mean, that's great creativity and kind of that go-get-it attitude to, you know, maybe find ways to get us what we really need at a cost reduction. So thank you.
Thank you all. Okay, so we should keep rolling here.
I'm gonna keep rolling. So that was the technology tab. The next tab that has any information behind it is food service. This is outside of the regular budget, but it has been, this information has been provided in the past, and we felt that it was still good information. So this is just, bless you.
Thank you.
To give you some idea of what our budget is for food service, and you'll notice when we do go through the budget page by page that we have increased the amount in the general budget to go towards food service because the cost of staff and food and everything keeps going up every year, and it's very hard to try to cover that all within the revenue that is received. So, but that tab, this is the food service, and the next tab that we have any information is the special funds. And this area is federal and state grants. The first sheet is Title I and Title IIA. That was originally called NCLB, No Child Left Behind. The state is now calling it the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. So it's called ESEA. So that sheet is on that. The next page is local entitlement, which is the federal grant for special education. But all these grants are supposed to use to help support our budget, not supplant it.
Right.
So we have to be there are major parameters that we have to follow in order to use these funds. So we have to be very careful, and believe me, they do check on it. And the last page is transition grant for proficiency-based education. This is money that we've been receiving since 2014-15. I don't know if that was the first year that we got it, but we've been getting this for several years now. It's to help us for training people on moving towards proficiency-based education and the standards-based high school diploma. So this is a grant that we've been receiving for several years now. And that's the end of the binder. So as I said, next week, we'll go through the budget in a more detailed way. Okay? So have fun reading.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
For something I feel like we saw last year, perhaps as each of you present your schools or areas' budgets, we would see that, but the class size ratios are great. Would be super helpful to see where our ed techs are, how many are there, who are non-instructional staff, what do we have for reading recovery? I mean, just that whole look at the staff in your building, so we see where people really are and what they're doing would be tremendously helpful as we triage this difficult budget.
So a map of just
Yeah, just
where,
list- yeah.
what everyone's responsibilities are, what
In your
caseloads
school.
are, and.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
chart numbers, so you can see,
Yep.
even trends over time, if you can, like, you know, just even, you know, what it was 5 years ago in Marie's
Sure.
day, if that's
Absolutely.
possible, just to see
Probably
the
the
changes.
best if it's done on the same format.
It would be helpful.
So I don't know who could create that.
Wasn't there something like that last year? I'm remembering that.
Last
We've
year-
had, we've had different iterations of it.
Right, last year, and it's been in existence for quite a while, actually, it had the total regular ed teachers, I think all regular ed professional staff, special ed was broken out. And then it had the total number of education technicians, but it didn't break it out between who was a library ed tech, who was a special ed tech, or RTI. It just said total number of
I think that would be useful, the
really useful.
breakdown
Yeah.
would be useful.
You would like the breakdown of what is what?
I think it would be useful.
And in what building they are too? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I have the basis, so I can break it out for that.
I just would like to acknowledge the student artwork on the front of your binder.
Yes,
Which was done
I
by,
noticed
I
that.
believe, middle school. Mike, you care to,
This is a photograph of, if it's the one, of a mural that was done by 4 students. I don't actually remember which year it was done,
Okay.
but Marguerite Lalaroner collected some different art samples, and I think folks went through and tried to just pick something that they thought you would enjoy on the cover of your binder. but-
Totally.
We need something up there.
Yeah, that's right.
Something to remind us why we're here. Thanks.
okay.
If there's nothing more.
So we're meeting next time, is it at the library or is it here?
So our next meeting is on Tuesday, March 7th,
And
and
that's-
it's here from
Here.
5 to 8:30. It's an extended half-day budget workshop in detail, where we'll hear
The 7th.
much more.
Seven. Yeah.
The 7th.
And we will have some light dinner ahead of time if people would like to come. It'll be here by 4:30, because we understand. We're all gonna be here for a long time, so please come a little early and have something to eat, fortify yourselves.
May I just ask if there are questions that you have between now and then that you know we would be better able to provide detailed responses? You might get them to Catherine, so that we can do our best among all of us to answer, have answers at that meeting.
Also, I think I would love to remind everybody, the board, the public, that next week, we are hoping for each department head to be able to present his or her budget and discussion. And we are going to hold questions at that time, other than clarifying and what, if there's something that's not understood, but to take notes and gather thoughts, and then send questions out afterwards, so that everybody gets a chance to present. We can all digest. and then send questions so that at the next meeting, those department heads will have had time to research and answer. That was the understanding, and I just wanted to put that out there again.
Right, so the timeline being then, we have this half-day workshop on March 7th, next Tuesday. The following Tuesday after that is the 14th, it's a regular school board meeting. If we could perhaps collect questions by that meeting so that we could then
Pass
give
them on.
those who need to answer them a fair chance to get their ducks in a row. By the following meeting after that, on Tuesday, March 21st, we're scheduled to reconvene here and answer those questions that we may
Have
have.
further discussion.
And further discussion.
One other clarifier, Howard, is for your principals and Kathy or whomever are asking for position proposals, are you asking that they no longer address those in their presentation, or?
I think they should. I mean, I think that you should,
know
if
what
I was the board,
requested?
I don't want them to hear it all.
Well, that's sort of how I'm
Mhm.
feeling, but I
Right,
didn't
so, no,
wanna
we don't want,
undermine what you asked for.
no, I hope that everybody will have an opportunity to really talk about their needs and point out to you where the budget stands today, where it doesn't work for them. And we'll get for you the proposal about the custodians, and I'm also gonna get one for you about the support for the nurses. And I think a lot of them are out there. I think.
And can I just say how appreciative we are for that opportunity? So even though, as the budget stands right now, the current proposal, certain positions are not in there, but knowing the big picture and the impact that
Right.
it has on everything, we very much appreciate having that opportunity, because
Good.
I think it's fair, and I think it paints the picture most fair for the board and
Yeah.
for the community, really.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I- I-